Hello and welcome to One Trek Mind with me, Michael.
And me, Raptor.
Today we're going to be discussing the 5th episode of the new season for Strange New Worlds, A Lens Through Time.
Through the lens of time.
Through the lens of time, thank you.
And I'm going to give the episode recap. So I'm just going to start by saying that I think this is potentially my favourite of the episodes so far.
After giving it some thought, I think so too.
It's not perfect, and we have problems with it, but we think it's one of our best ones. So the episode starts with a log entry from our mystery nurse, whose name is finally revealed in this episode as Campbell.
Gamble.
And he's giving us...
It's Gamble.
Gamble? I thought it was Campbell.
No, it's Gamble, like you gamble at the slots.
Okay, Gamble then, in that case. And he's telling us all about what they're doing, and it seems to be indicative that this episode is going to be going over an event which is going to change him. We hear that Nurse Chapel and Corby are back in town working on a dig site they've been at where they've discovered some next generation technology which basically might result in being able to learn the secrets of immortality. And they've got the Enterprise in to help with that particular research. Corby is outrightly a little bit nervous working with Starfleet and having to give Starfleet officers orders, which I think is fair. La'an and Chapel then have a conversation about Spock because Chapel is fully aware that La'an and Spock are having a thing. La'an explains that it's basically like a friends with benefits situation. They're not labeling it, it's just a bit of fun. Chapel is clearly not completely convinced, but they get on with the job. We also briefly have Patel coming into sickbay, and it makes it clear that she's like completely 100% better. And it's revealed by Mbenga that Gamble is going to be going with the away team, Corby, Chapel, etc., down to the planet. So it's his first away team in 6. He's been with the crew for 6 months. He's really hyper and excited about it, which was very endearing, I think.
Makes it very tragic, too, as well. Makes me feel really bad for him.
We have a brief briefing scene that explains what they're going after. It's revealed also that Erica's brother is going to be going along to record it all for the documentary that he's working on that we had mentioned in episode 2. So we've got a full cast of returning characters, basically, for this episode. They beam down to the planet with this funky alien guide, where they have found this magnetic anomaly, and the Enterprise is going to open this magnetic anomaly to find out what's there. Uhura and Erica's brother are just totally flirting, so they're still into each other. And the Enterprise does its thing, and it's revealed this massive structure in the mountain. And then we have the title sequence. As the episode starts, after the title sequence, Spock and La'an beam down as extra help to explore this strange temple that has been discovered. At this point, I think both me and Michael were thinking that this was setting up a sort of, we've got the exes and the current relationship partners, and we're obviously going to have some XV current relationship friction stuff going on again, and we were both a little pessimistic about that being part of the episode.
Yeah. It seemed pretty obvious that was the direction that it was going to head in, and, thankfully, it's not.
It's explained by Corby and Chapel that they think that the aliens that constructed this were using quantum instability in order to make themselves immortal. And we've heard this sort of quantum reality stuff before. It's what resulted in the musical episode. It seems to be Strange New Worlds' thing. They open a way in using Chapel's blood to open the door. And inside they find this very expansive alien structure, which also happens to block comms and transporters, because of course it does. But they also find within a bunch of bodies that have apparently starved to death, and it's believed they are to be grave robbers. Upon discovering the bodies, Spock is like, we need to leave, this is obviously more, this could be dangerous. I think we need to go back to the ship and think of a safer way of doing this. Corby argues the point because he's a scientist and wants to stay. Chapel kind of takes his side, which I thought was strange.
I agree. It felt mildly out of character for her. It felt very much like I'm gonna side with my boyfriend, and I was kind of like, but this is dangerous.
Yeah. Spock decides to ask the alien guide that is with them, which I thought was a good thing to do. Mm-hmm. And the alien guide is like, yeah, if let's explore this. It might be dangerous, but we want to know the answers. So they carry on exploring. The bodies of the grave robbers have this tablet with them and this other device, which looks like a sort of glowing glass ball.
Looked like a rememberall.
It did. Gamble picks it up, and it explodes in his face, and we have this, well, it shocked both me and Michael. We both exclaimed, because it tears his eyeballs out of his skull, and the episode takes great joy in showing you that he has completely lost his eyeballs.
Yeah, this was definitely the moment the episode shifted in tone a lot. It was sort of like, okay, little adventure, little romancy, awkwardness. Holy shit, we just got into some really weird horror stuff, and it really shifts from this point onward.
Gamble is taken back up to the ship. Down on the planet, the native reacts very badly to some of the stuff he's seeing, attempts to leave the temple, and gets vaporized for his troubles, and then all the doors slam shut, sealing the crew inside the temple. On the ship, Mbenga is trying to regenerate Gamble's eyes with this medical device, but he reveals to Pike, who comes down to find out what's going on, that there's some sort of biological agent or chemical within the wounds of his eyeballs that is stopping the regeneration process. Mbenga feels really guilty for having sent him down there, which I thought was a perfectly valid response. And then Pike explains that, you can't protect everyone, you can't save everyone, stuff like this is going to happen, which, they're in a dangerous line of work. Perfectly good captaining there. On the planet, the group discuss what their best course of action is. They eventually choose to go deeper into the structure, and the temple seems to be connected to Chapel. It's reacting to her and her DNA, which is, they think, why the alien guy that was with them was killed, because he wasn't Chapel. They unlock the next door, but everyone ends up split into groups. Chapel and La'an, Uhura and Erica's brother, and Corby and Spock. They all end up in 3 different rooms.
Which we learn later is technically not the case.
Which is technically not the case, yes. On the ship, Mbenga is still trying to figure out the situation when he discovers to his horror that Gamble is showing up on the ship's monitors, at least, as 100% brain dead. That apparently he has no brain activity whatsoever, but yet still seems to be conscious and alive, which is obviously kind of concerning for both Mbenga and Gamble. Gamble's reaction, I think, is pretty realistic in this situation. On the planet, La'an finds Chinese writing next to this big statue with which also has life signs readings, and it seems to be in a state of quantum flux. Spock and Corby have this pit, and they discover that the tablet that the grave robbers found tells of evil parasites that have apparently come from another quantum reality. And inside the pit, Spock discovers that there are more of the exploding glowing ball objects that injured Gamble. Spock then sees something that looks like a Gorn, the sort of same thing he saw when he was mind melding with Batel in episode 1, I believe it was.
I think it was the 3rd episode.
Or the 3rd episode.
I would also like to point out, it didn't look quite like the Gorn. It had this mandible looking jaw that was distinctly different from the Gorn.
It was up there for such a short length of time. It looked like a Gorn to me.
Yeah, to me it did not. I was like, that looks like something else. Don't know what, but it doesn't quite look like a Gorn to me.
Back on the ship, the crew have another briefing with Captain Pike and Pelia and Scotty in the meeting, where it's revealed that they think that the orb is a containment unit for something, and Pelia reacts subconsciously with fear. She's kind of terrified of this thing. She says that it's older than anything she has ever seen, and it creeps her out on a subconscious level. So obviously, this is not good news. Gamble in sickbay then starts talking to Mbenga about his daughter, which obviously he knows he wouldn't know about, and Axe is clearly not himself. He's acting possessed by something. At that point in time, Patel walks in, and suddenly both of them start acting like hyper-possessed, talking a different language, and end up having this sudden fist fight. Mbenga is KO'd, their fight gets like really, really aggressive. Luckily, Pike shows up, causes enough of a distraction. Gamble legs it, and Mbenga is able to knock out Patel with hypo spray. But clearly, something is going down. Down on the planet, all three groups that have been split away from each other start sharing what they've discovered, and they reveal, thanks to Erica Brothers' camera, that they might all look like they're in different rooms, but they're actually in the same room on different dimensional planes. And in order to all get back together, they have to do separate things in their plane. On the ship, we have another conversation between Pike and Battelle, where she explains she saw Gamble and had this almighty feeling of anger and violence and wanting to kill or eradicate him. So she also said that it felt very old. So it's clear that there's some sort of ancient alien consciousness involved here. Gamble had previously been captured by security, taken to the brig. He then manages to escape by literally walking through a force field, kills the guard that's keeping an eye on the brig cell, and it seems very obvious now that the real Gamble is no longer in there. Down on the planet, they have to solve a sort of classic Indiana Jones-esque "is there a bridge here or isn't there a bridge here" puzzle in order to escape. Corby is a little hesitant about Chapel doing this because obviously he thinks that this is too dangerous, but Chapel trusts what Spock has been saying. They discover that there is actually a bridge there when it looks like there isn't, and they're able to walk across and escape back outside and obviously get back to the ship. On the ship, however, Gamble has held everyone in engineering hostage. Mbenga arrives, armed, tries to talk him down. Pelia warns Mbenga that Gamble isn't in there anymore, but Mbenga doesn't seem to believe her. And then just before Gamble shoots Mbenga, Pelia shoots him first, kills Gamble, or kills his body.
I don't think that's what happened, but I'll explain when you finish the recap.
Forces the entity out of him. They capture it within one of the spare containment ball things, and Scotty beams this into the transporter buffer and leaves it there in order to keep it essentially in a form of stasis. Their episode ends with a meeting between everybody discussing what has happened. It's revealed that these spirits or these aliens that are possessing people are called the Vesda, and Pelia explains that, you know, it doesn't matter where you go in the universe, there is good and there is evil, and she knows these things as evil as consumers. She's legitimately terrified of these things. And the episode ends with it looking like the Vesda that's currently in the transporter buffer might be able to get into the ship's computer. We see the console glitching. And that's where the episode ends.
Now let's break it down here. Just to go off of what I think happened with Gamble, it's clear that she used the stun option with her phaser when she shot at him, because it was the blue color, which...
Yeah, I thought she had, but then they speak like he's dead, so...
I dislike the whole blue being used for phaser thing, but whatever. I think the reason he's dead is the fact that he was always dead. I think the moment his eyeballs got burst out of his face, he was dead. And the entire time it was this creature, like, pretending to be him until it, you know, had either gained enough control or just had enough playing around and decided, all right, I'm going full in on this. And as soon as it left his body, he was just a husk. Like, I think that's why they said you have no brain function at all, because he was dead. Like, it was just using his body like a husk, basically, which is horrifying and really, really tragic for that character. Like, genuinely really tragic that he was so excited to go on this away mission, and the first thing that happens is he has this really brutal, violent death and is then used by this creature to enact whatever evil goals it has. Yeah, I think that's why he was dead at the end of the episode, not because Pelia, shot him. But yeah, right off the bat, my initial reaction to this episode wasn't the strongest. I was probably a little more critical of it than I think it warranted. But I'm glad we didn't record this right after watching it and gave me a little time to digest, because after digesting it a bit, I agree. I think it's my favorite episode of this season. It felt like something new. Whereas this show in general has been a lot of like nostalgia, it's been a lot of kind of classic Trek tropes and things. This is an episode where I'm like, this feels very unique and really terrifying, like genuinely scary shit that really spooked me. I was like, I'm actually pretty fucking unnerved with like the tone of this episode and the way we're like slowly revealing what's going on with these contained creatures and what they might be or what their relation to the Gorn might be and like all these different things. And I really liked it. But I think the opening like 15 minutes of the episode I was not the biggest fan of for two big reasons. One, it was really relationship heavy, and a lot of these relationships I just don't care about. I really don't think they work. I think Chapel and Corby are in a relationship simply for the canon reason that they're engaged in the original series. Like, there's genuine chemistry between the two, but they haven't really shown me a reason why they feel so strongly about one another, other than he said a really nice poem to her, and that's how they, like, fell in love. So I'm not really feeling those scenes all that much.
No.
There's a really awkward scene that I truly did not like between La'an and Chapel, where she even says like, oh, don't be one of those girls right now. And I was kind of like, ugh, this is leaving kind of a bad taste in my mouth. This feels like a relationship drama CW kind of show. I'm not really enjoying this. And then there's also the relationship between Uhura and Ortegas' brother, which I don't inherently have an issue with, but I also don't really care about all that much. I'm kind of just like, okay, they want to have Uhura have like a love interest, whatever, doesn't really do much for me. And the other reason the first 15 minutes were really frustrating for me, that hasn't changed since digesting the episode, is they were acting so stupid during those first 15 minutes, and it drove me insane.
They really were.
Like, Nurse Chapel just sticks her hand into the device, and it luckily did not like take her whole hand or something. It just pricked her finger and then let a drop of blood fall. I'm like, you got really lucky right there, girl.
Well, what pissed me off about that scene, her boyfriend goes to, get a knife and slash his hand in order to get the blood. She says, oh, no, wait, maybe there's a different way. And then she sticks her hand under some alien technology that could have done God knows what to her, sticks a needle in her that could have infected her with God knows what, and gets the blood out of her that way. I'm like, your way is worse, is more dangerous than the way your boyfriend was gonna do it.
Yeah, I agree. I even like that La'an also called her out on that and was like, that was really risky. Like, shouldn't have done that. And then on top of that, they go in here and they start to explore. That's all fine. But then they find a set of bodies, and Spock makes the very, very reasonable, logical decision like, hey, we should go back and tell the captain about this before we proceed, because this now changes things. We were just exploring some empty ruins. Now we are in a gravesite of some sort. We should reevaluate here. And then everyone says, no. Like, it's fine. For science sake, we need to stay and explore. And it's like, you can still do that. Just take a beat to go talk about it on the ship. As much as I love Gamble's character, and I'm actually really sad to see that he's no longer going to be on the show, it was dumb as hell for him to just pick up this orb thing and then stick it right up next to his face. I'm like, what are you doing, bro? Have you ever seen a movie before? Like, that's, I don't know. It just made me feel like we weren't dealing with professionals. We were dealing with like a ragtag group of random people. And I'm like, you're all supposed to be pretty well trained on how to deal with away missions and everything. And just randomly grabbing and touching shit and not going to tell your captain or follow protocol. You're making some really stupid decisions in order for us to get the plot rolling here, and it bothered me. I was like, I feel like we could have done this in a different way that didn't feel so clunky.
You know what I haven't seen is a tricorder in a while.
Agreed.
If this situation had occurred in Legacy Trek, we've found doorway. The first thing they would have all done, pulled out their tricorders, scanned the bloody thing to find out what's going on.
They did use the tricorder to study the weird statue that was registering as a life sign. They did use it.
True,
then.
but it feels like Legacy Trek, there would have been tricorder use practically for every step of this whole episode. Like, they found weird ball item on the ground. Let's scan it before we pick it up. And if I think about previous episodes of Strange New Worlds, it feels like tricorders don't often show up all that much.
Maybe they do and we're just not thinking of the moments that they do, but I agree, I can't think of too many moments off the top of my head, aside from that lovely little moment in the crossover episode where Boimler says, oh yeah, they have a tendency to explode, which was very funny. But yeah, I agree, there hasn't been a huge amount of tricorder usage, it doesn't seem. But yeah, once you get past those opening 15 minutes though, I was pretty glued to the screen. It got really, really tense. I actually felt some genuine dread for the characters and what might happen in this scenario. I felt really awful for Gamble the entire time, even though it probably wasn't even him for most of it. Just hearing him like really panicking and wondering like what's going on as he's being possessed by this creature, I felt really truly terrible for him. It was actually pretty scary. So I give them all the kudos for that. And the idea of this interdimensional quantum entity that comes from another reality being this all-consuming evil thing, it feels really, again, really horror-driven in a good way. I thought it was very cool. It made me excited for what's coming up next because they definitely are setting us up for an ongoing story here with the Vesda. And I did like that little bit at the end, like right at the very end, where the screen glitches out while he's looking at the pattern buffer data, because obviously something's going to go really wrong with them holding the Vesda in the pattern buffer. That is not going to go well. I still think it's a good idea to put it in the pattern buffer, because I'm like, what would be the other option? Just shoot it off into space and then it's someone else's problem later down the line? That would be a terrible idea. And they can't beam it back into the temple because they established that you can't beam anything in or out of there. So putting it in the pattern buffer was their best option, I think. However, it's clear that's not going to work in the long run, and it makes me excited. I'm like actually excited about where the story is going. And since this has been such an episodic show, it's kind of nice to see a semblance of serialized storytelling kind of creeping in here. I do like that.
Yeah, I think the only thing that we were kind of sad about was that they chose to do this to a character that we liked.
And just showed up.
That we were liking and that had just shown up. I think we both thought this was a little unfair to poor old Gamble.
I really think it was, particularly to the actor. Not only did I like his character, but this episode to me proved that he was a very good actor. Like, he really sold those emotions of terror and dread and the evil stuff all really, really well. So I'm like...
So did Pellier, to be fair.
True, but it's kind of a shame that we're not going to see him anymore. I'm like, oh, he was pretty cool. Like, I liked him. I think he's a good actor. I think it's a real shame that they decided to do that. Especially because had they done what they did here to a well-known character, like a main character from the show, obviously you can't do it to like Spock or Uhura, but if they had done this to like La'an, I think it would have landed even harder because it's a character that is very well established. It would have really come as a big shock that they decided to actually kill off a major character in such a like horrific and tragic way. I can see why they didn't, just for the sake of furthering those stories with those characters, but I do think it's a shame that they decided to do that with Gamble. But my god, I think he did a great job in this episode. Like, all the kudos to that actor, to a lot of the actors in this episode, but him in particular, I was very impressed by him.
Yeah, I thought this was just a very, very strong episode. Like you said earlier on to me in conversation afterwards, felt more like Stargate than necessarily Star Trek, which I do agree with in a way.
I mean, I really felt that with the Chinese writing there. I think it was Chinese, right? It wasn't something else?
No, yeah, they said it was Chinese.
Okay.
It's a shame they don't like kind of question that a bit more. It was one of those like plot threads or little elements that they just never went back to.
Again, I feel like they probably will, considering this is going to be an ongoing story in the show. But yeah, that it felt very Stargate to me in that particular moment, because I was like, oh, this reminds me of like, you know, humans being taken to another planet, so that particular culture is established all over that world kind of thing. It was neat. I was like, ooh, that's weird. That's interesting. I wonder why. And hopefully we get an answer to that at some point.
I would say also that I did quite like the sort of puzzle rooms, riddle sort of thing that they had going on with the temple itself. That felt very Indiana Jones, and I love all that stuff. It felt very Stargatey to have all these riddle rooms and stuff to figure out.
It did feel like an Indiana Jones style episode, just cranked up to 11 when it comes to the horror aspect of it, because Indiana Jones would go into like the supernatural kind of creepy stuff occasionally, but for the most part it was, you know, an adventure story. This felt like if they took most of the adventure part of that out and replaced it with horror instead, and it was cool. It was a neat vibe. I really enjoyed the tone of this episode. And like I said, even though I think gouging his eyes out was perhaps a little too brutal, like on one hand, I think it's a little too brutal for me. It feels like we're going into Discovery territory of like shock value gore. But on the other hand, it did raise the stakes. And I agree with you that sometimes older Star Trek feels a little too sanitized and kid friendly when it doesn't necessarily need to be. So this felt appropriately dramatic and horrifying. Even though that moment initially didn't work for me, after some thought, I'm like, actually, considering where we all went with the episode, I think that does work, and it was horrifying and awful and everything. But I really like the tone shift there, because again, the episode starts off making you think this is going to be some sort of relationship drama episode, and it's very awkward and quirky. Yeah, and I really wasn't. I was just like, if this is going to be the whole episode, I am not down for this, man. And then as soon as that happened, the tone and the pacing of the episode shifted really fast, and it just kind of took off from that point and got really, really good. So yeah, I was a pretty big fan of this episode. Again, some gripes with it. I still think the first 15 minutes are not very good. There's like the occasional moment in the first 15 minutes that I enjoyed, usually stuff with Gamble's character, but for the most part I was like, I don't know, I'm not really digging this, and then it got really good, so I was very happy to see that.
Yeah, same. I agree. I think it was a really, really good, really creepy, really different sort of episode, and setting up some more interesting things that might give some more information about the Gorn, at least. And obviously these Vesda beings, whatever they are.
I mean, I really like the potential of maybe doing something unique with the Gorn here. How they might have this like ancient rivalry with the Vesda, and maybe the reason the Gorn are acting like crazy monsters isn't because that's who the Gorn are. Maybe that's because they either went through a really horrific struggle with the Vesda and it forced them to kind of become that, or maybe they are themselves already possessed by the Vesda and are acting insane because of that reason. I don't know, but I feel like for once I'm kind of optimistic about what we might be doing with the Gorn here, and I'm like, cool, all right.
There is potential here for some interesting stories. Let's hope they don't do a Picard season 3 and
it was the Borg all along.
It was the Borg all along, trying to subvert our expectations.
That was a really good episode, and I think it was the best of the season thus far. I feel like this is the moment the season has found its footing, and I hope it maintains that in the second half of the season.
Agreed. So we both thought it was a really good episode, but what did you guys think? Let us know down in the comments if you are watching these. I know that Strange New Worlds is not really doesn't seem like many people on YouTube are watching Strange New Worlds or looking at it at the moment. But if you have watched the episode, let us know down in the comments what you thought about it and what you think of the Vesda. Don't forget, if you are new to the channel and you like this video, please do consider subscribing to hear more from us, get our thoughts on the rest of the series of Strange New Worlds and also Star Trek in general. We have a lot of ideas for new videos to do after Strange New Worlds Season 3 is done and dusted, so I hope you are all around for that. But until then, it is goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.